And the persons to do that, yeah, a few are here. I mean, I see people like Wackers, Ashton Nugi. I see people like, in terms of forestry and land management, people like Dr. David Lloyd in terms of agronomy and soils and soil management. People like Dr. Al Mario, you know. I see people like Whitney Louis, people like Deleuze Warrington, and so on, as farmers of note who have spent a lifetime learning how to manage Dominica's natural systems of soil and water and climate and whatnot, you know, and who should be our iconic instructors and guide and be on the boards of the college and so forth, that would guide the programs in science and biology and land use, you know, so that in fact the students coming out of there, they don't just have knowledge of the technical, you know, areas of their field, but they understand how to manage those, how to blend those with people who are in water management, for example, people who are in waste management, for example. So they are having an integrated approach to their education that makes them much more valuable, much more useful to the country as a whole. So education, definitely, you know, in education, who are some of the people? Ron Green, you know, yeah. I mean, just to name a sampling or two, yourself, Billy, you know, Pastor Nevier, you know, many of the other partners in the grouping, Cameron, you know, I'm so impressed, you know, that he displays such a knowledge, an intimate knowledge of how to in many areas, and so on and so on. Mr. Wilson, Brother Wilson. So, and then of course overseas, my colleague of mine going back all the way to 1970, 72, is Dr. Alan Williams, Guyanese, married to a Dominican, Henkel Christian's daughter. He's my go-to man for economic analysis and assessment of any project or program and policy and so on. And we still work together. After all these years, we work together. There's several others. There's a guy called Richardson Franklin, Grenadian, who's on the top of his field in terms of design and commissioning right through of renewable energy systems in wind and in solar. And there's several in Guadeloupe that I used to know, but I can't remember their names now. I'm just calling the names of those that I'm in fairly constant contact with. And all of them, they don't ascribe or subscribe to our vision, you know, to the extent that you and I do, to the fullest extent that we do. Their level of spiritual engagement is maybe not at the top of their list of, you know, this tells me that I can do that kind of list. But these are good people. These are honest people. These are people who will listen, notwithstanding their enormous technical and professional competence. So I think those are some of the indicators of the kinds of person that we want. There are a couple of people who are, as environmentalists, do impact assessment studies and have been doing that for decades. There's this one person out in Antigua whose company I'm aware of because I helped get it started and going and off the ground and so on. We can pull her in, and she has a network of other persons that she works with from out of Trinidad and Grenada and so. So, you know, if we can just realize that we're sitting on a gold mine of human resource competence, human resource capability, but it is the macroeconomy that is using them to kind of try to justify the macroeconomy's half measures with regards to sustainability. But they would love to be part of an organization or an initiative that shows a wholesale commitment to the building of literally a new society in the Caribbean. And of course, that goes on beyond. I have colleagues in East and West Africa, colleagues in Malaysia, and so on, colleagues in India, who we've worked together now for over 30 years. We're not in daily contact, but these are persons who, if I got in touch with them and explained to them and send them a one-page as to what we're trying to do, they would be here. They would make themselves available either virtually or, for many of them who've longed to come to the Caribbean, they would come. And so It raises the question of resources to mobilize. Initially, I don't think we need. What I think we need is to just put our heads and hearts and minds together and get this thing up to the point where sensitive people can see it. I can think of a couple of sensitive institutions that I can go to and would suggest we go to, and then raise the financing that would be needed to travel people who we don't have, who's with expertise we don't have, and to sort of facilitate things that would have a direct financial cost. But for now, let us start where we are, in Dominica, in the Caribbean, and I think we will be pleasantly surprised to find that we have the expertise in a number of key and critical areas. I think of Frederick Barron, who's now in the US, but he's a tremendous financial and and fiscal analyst, from a business standpoint and so on. So people like that are available and can be gradually brought back home from their diaspora assignments and gradually make a difference. So from that standpoint, as well as the standpoint of people in the arts and culture, when you think arts and culture, you think of Alwyn, but Pat Aaron, the Dice, Ophelia, what's her name, Mikhail. There are lots of people who, by virtue of their involvement in their art form, have become really wonderful teachers if they wish. Let's give them the opportunity. As regards forestry, I think people like Chris Maxime and all the other guys in forestry have shown what can happen when you pay attention to a sector like forestry. And just under 100 years ago, we started doing something that has blossomed into, 40% of our land being protected by law. There are not too many countries in the world that can claim that kind of, geometry with regards to their forested land. So, converting that into real life means, where is Dominica's, top flight school of tropical forestry? We used to send our foresters to Cyprus in the Mediterranean. That's where Chris Maxime studied. We need a forestry facility right here in Dominica, in the heart of the country that demonstrates that it knows how to do this thing called forestry and forestry management, and involve communities in it, and build knowledge from out of it, and export that knowledge in a way that generates value for the economy, etc., etc. So a forestry unit. Of course, back to shipping a little bit, an institution that actually encourages shipping, a training center for seamen and for people who will run and manage the most modern type of vessels, but modern in the sense that a lot of the technology will be developed and adapted by our people doing that kind of research here. And then back to solid waste, and then to sports, for instance. Who says we need a stadium to seat 20,000 people in a population of 60,000? That's 1/3 of the population you're talking about putting in one place. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. It's unsafe. So why don't we, if you will, decongest, the technology of sporting facilities and disperse our sporting facilities all around the island? And what's to prevent people from taking a drive for 25 minutes or 30 minutes to get to the next sporting center? That's just 20 minutes, Think of the importance to our transportation sector, buses and taxis and whatnot. So, if you will, a decentralizing of sporting facilities, and eventually getting to what I think would be the quintessential, sustainable sporting strategy, which is the Nature Island Games, where all the things that we bring visitors here to do for fun, to hike, to swim, to scuba, to snorkel, to bird watch, to do whatever, we turn that into an opportunity for what we can call humane competition, where a group of bird watchers go out and there's a prize at the end of it for the person who in the allotted time was able to identify the greatest number of bird species between point A and point B, or the greatest number of plant species, or vascular plant species, or microorganism species. make it really interesting. And you see, what you're doing is you're integrating the highest level of biological and other science into sports and finding a way to generate from that an industry that requires your students to be trained in botany and biology and biochemistry and molecular biology, so they can be the tour guides and be the adjudicators and be the coaches, if you will, for that kind of nature island games. And people come here just like they go elsewhere to learn how to do the Olympics and the mega Olympics, whatever. They would come here to learn how to do nature island games, how to compete, and how to organize, how to design, and how people get jobs overseas to go and help people set up their own nature island games facilities or nature games facilities, and we create eventually a regional, then maybe a global network of these facilities, of nature-based facilities, just like you have a global network of World Heritage sites, World Heritage nature sites. So people who travel exclusively just to see World Heritage sites, so you could have the same kind of behavior pattern develop into a new tourism behavior, a new tourism strategy that has Dominica at the center. So these are some of the things. Housing, we have to stop this foolishness of thinking that a building is a house. A building is not a house, and certainly it's not a home. So the design, the community-driven, engine that kind of helps decide what kind of facilities, where should they be located, what should be the design, what sort of materials go into that, how do we minimize, if you will, the high and rising cost of maintenance, how do we ensure that every building we put up is renewable energy driven, that all the gray water is recycled, that all the black water is treated to the point where it can be used again to irrigate lands, etc., etc. How in the nature island, we have the government that says it is committed to nature is building facilities on which there's not one solar panel, there's not one wind turbine, there's not one recycling of grey water, there's not one composting facility that would take care of some of the solid waste and so on. So we. These are things screaming out for attention. So we would in fact put our brand Après Bon Dieu c'est la terre on that. Everything like the housing. So the windows would be seen to come from here. The roofing material, the furniture, the mortar that went into the thing would incorporate recycled rubberized crumb from the recycling of our used tires, etc., 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 etc. So in a real sense, you're building a society from the ground up that uses as much as possible the locally available raw materials and technology, and generates, permanent jobs, lifetime jobs for people, because those jobs will now be in great demand in other islands around us to begin with, when they catch the fever, and in other places in our region and beyond. As far as setting priorities, clearly education would be a priority. Knowledge would be a priority. The valuing of knowledge, hence the valuing of persons who have knowledge in an oral sense, the valuing of places that are the depository, or if you will, that were the trigger for knowledge in the past, like our old mills all over the island, and our old roads and things like that. Whatever. So as UNESCO has it, both the tangible and the intangible heritage of our island begins to be involved in the mix of resources and things that define us, and that define and shape our economy, define and shape our people. I mean, a Dominican, anywhere they go, after a couple of decades of this kind of living and working, would be readily identifiable, just like the Germans were identified because they were precision driven, as were the Swiss, etc., etc. Well, we would become identified because not only are we precision driven, but we're precise about the fundamentals of life, the resources that give life, and these management systems that sustain these resources. So I'm really suggesting a complete restructuring, reorganizing. It's not a reset, to use the term that seems to have become a little popular nowadays. But because reset means that you were there before and you need to go back, you need to reboot. No. This is a new boot. This is the installation of a whole new set of software, a whole new type of hardware that actually ultimately can give you different results. That's what is at the root and at the heart of this new approach to doing things. So that means, for example, things like shipping that we take for granted and we feel, let Benu for tropical provide our ship. No. Shipping involves knowledge. It involves experience and expertise of people like Captain Neville Wade, Captain Cyril Hyacinth, and all the other captains that went before. And it involves the possibility of shipbuilding. It involves the possibility of actually shipbuilding not just for Dominica, but for the region. Carrier Coup at one point used to build vessels for the entire region. That no longer happens. We can restore such a kind of thing. Ship repair, ship maintenance, so that you don't just have facilities for mega yachts and facilities for luxury boats. You have facilities for boats and shipping vehicles that respond directly to the movement of goods and the movement of people and services, so that we develop the possibility of building our own ferries and creating, if you will, a homegrown cruise industry within the Caribbean. So people can take the bigger boats if they wish, just like you take a bigger plane and land in Antigua and then take a smaller plane to Dominica. Take a bigger boat, come here, get off that bigger boat and go on a smaller boat for a 1-week cruise. And we provide that service, and the large vessel sits there and waits for a week. So, it's a radical revisiting and reviewing of the way we would be doing things. And shipping is just one of them. Imagine, for instance, in the area of science and technology, all the innovations that people have come up with in order to survive, we would systematically research them, identify their pluses, reveal their weaknesses, make the corrections and adjustments, and actually develop them into practices in agronomy, practices in forestry, practices in water management, practices in waste management that we can now value as a product that people will either come here to buy or we can export and we can apply, so that we are a living example of the kinds of technology initiatives that we're taking that would challenge the technology from the top down, which simply says, how can they make more money by doing less, etc. No. We make more money, quote unquote, or we attract more value by doing more, by having more people involved and engaged in doing more. I really believe that is kind of exciting. So shipping would be one of the areas that we develop, and we have the documentation. I mentioned waste management. We have that. We can show that it is possible to get to a zero waste society. We can show that. We can do that. And our small size can be turned into an advantage for us in that regard. As you can see, these new demands for a more sensitive and sensible administration will require structural adjustments, meaning architectural adjustments, new rules, new guidelines, new procedures, etc., so that the more interconnected government begins to function more properly. The same level of connection would be made into such areas as disaster management, such areas as national security, such areas as natural and resource management. In other words, these do not just become appendages to various ministries and then get lost in the budgetary fray, but they become essential hooks essential doorways to and from the prospects for the development of a country that is different, country that is sensitive to the if you will, what's the word, to the sacredness of the earth and to the sacredness of life and to the sacredness of our relationship with our Creator. I mean, writ large, it means that at the center of everything we do, we have to find a way to signal, not only in the way we behave, in the policies we make, in the staff that is engaged, but in the outcome, the decisions, etc. That everything here is driven by après mon Dieu, c'est la terre, which means we put in God first in everything, and so that becomes the litmus test of our effectiveness in reflecting that motto of putting God first, that decision to put God first. I am sure that will you should attract some pushback, as most new quote-unquote things would, but actually it is one of the strongest pillars of a new state, a new government, a new country, a new society, and eventually a new region and a new world. I am also aware that things such as innovation, science and education need to be given a hell of a lot more prominence in the behavior and in the structure of the society. We cannot be celebrating incompetence. We cannot be celebrating inaccuracy or vagueness or mediocrity, and just give people titles because we feel to or we can. What we celebrate must bring benefit, must bring applause, must add value to all of us in one way or another, materially, socially, spiritually, and otherwise. And so the whole, if you will, value system by which the country is managed and operated will begin to reflect that. And so persons from outside of that, like our neighboring countries, islands, states, regions of the world, who would wish to do business with us, would need to understand what we are about and what we bring to the table, and that there are certain no-nos for us and there are certain yeses for us. And if we can't even get those sorted out at the outset, then we're obviously not going to be able to have a conversation. For instance, we can't have a conversation if we don't believe in God, that kind of thing. So I really am saying that we have to be totally creative in our development and application of knowledge, of science and technology in a way that doesn't replace our relationship with the Creator, but in fact that reinforces, underpins, and links, that relationship with the Creator to everything that we do and say. For instance, with money, what is the role and what is the position of money in a society like that? How do we reward? Is it money? Is the only reward? How do we fix things so that the currencies of note to our country are not just money, and that in fact, if part of it is money, we have to find ways to establish greater and more complete management over, the value of that money, just like we would establish management systems that would give us some control over the value of our forest systems, for example, so that we would move to the point where countries doing business with us would have to begin to accept that part of our wealth is in our soil, our forests, our waters, and we value them to this tune. Maybe we'll end up having $1 trillion GDP. We don't know. When we complete a complete and comprehensive evaluation of our natural resources, which the world, quote unquote, pulling and tugging against it, is being drawn to accept as being vital to life. Without air, you don't have life. Without water, you don't have life. Well, what gives you air? What maintains water? And so it is these engines that give and maintain these critical elements of life. That is exactly what Dominica, a new Dominica, places as value and puts it in its books. Our national accounts would reflect not just how much we traded, how much we borrowed, how much we paid, etc., and GDP writ narrower, but it will reflect a total domestic and product, GDP, gross domestic product, in a way that values the natural resources that we have, and hence places of value on our investment in knowledge and technology and manpower to protect and enhance those natural life-giving systems. So we begin to readjust and redefine the entire business of natural resource accounting, national income accounting, budgeting, calculating the value of our goods and services, so that our tourism, for example, instead of being a cheapo tourism, can actually be bumped up in value, because the world now begins to understand that what they can get here in terms of health and wellness and peace and quiet and safety, they couldn't afford it in their country, so they can afford to pay for it if we can deliver it here in a sensible and sustainable manner. So it's an entire readjustment of the way we think about these things. That's what I'm getting at. As regards charting the way forward, as you are aware by now, I'm guided by the work that has been done by several others and by myself over the last few decades. Guided, for example, about the need for what we call the integrated approach, guided for the need to deliberately structure the mechanisms for policy making and decision making so that they ensure and require the full engagement and participation of all critical sectors of the society, building into the structure of administration of the country and of the institutions of the country, the requirement for periodic review, assessment, and inventory of how are we doing vis-a-vis the goals that we set ourselves. Are the outcomes getting any closer, getting any clearer? If not, why not? And what adjustments, of course, need to be made in that regard? I am also acutely aware of the need to tap into some of the resource areas of our country that have hitherto not been tapped into. For example, the women of our country and countries and of the world, I believe they bring a particularly strong management capacity that is, if you will, fired up and engineered to respond to the human and humane side of our beings, which our male construct doesn't always allow us to. I also believe that women bring a certain kind of energy that actually always places the preservation and protection of life at the center of everything they do, much more so than men. We tend to be a little more careless and cavalier about children, about youth, about the elderly, and so on. And so I think, among others, of course, it is critical, therefore, for these reasons, plus, to engage fully the women of our society. And that will lead to another critical consideration for any new construct. It's ongoing and permanent human resource development, expansion of that human capacity to understand God's earth, to be able to relate to God's earth, and to learn how to manage and guide the use of the resources of the earth in a way that doesn't compromise the prospects for future generations. So that deep sense of humility as well as learning and knowledge about things natural would need to inform and guide us, and hence be one of the areas around which we would conduct periodic assessments and inventory and review. Structures of a kind that would allow us to do these things, which sound complicated but really truly are not when once one wraps one's head about the essential nature of these things. For example, cabinet of a country does not need to be large. We know that. A cabinet of Dominica, in my humble opinion, shouldn't be more than 7 main ministries, and with all the other ministries kind of, hubbing and spoking away from these major ministries. I really do believe that is in fact more than adequate for our needs. So a smaller cabinet, which means a higher level of competency and capacity at the ministerial level, at the permanent secretarial level, at the department head and technical level, at the level of the institutions like statutory boards that would have thereby to relate to these more efficient and more competent ministries and be able to respond in a two-way kind of knowledge traffic. I am also aware that we have to structure in the same way that cabinet meets once a week. The senior administrative officers and technical officers of all ministries need to be meeting once a week. And that needs to be a part of the job description that has to be done. It has to happen. I'm going to stop here and I'll continue in a minute. There's a lot more, but I think that's kind of a good indicative kind of sampling of the direction that we can consider, we need to go. And you can see that, as you say, a lot of work needs to be done right now to begin to convert these ideas and this vision of a new Après-Bon-Dieu c'est la Terre Dominica, into reality.